I'm not live on YouTube because I didn't hit the YouTube button. You wait for that to boot up here. I'm sorry, YouTube. I've just gone through a couple of games of the first series. I'm sorry that I didn't include you guys sooner. But you're here now. We're just going through the Vegas Golden Knight clinching game. You didn't miss much in terms of recap. That's on me. I forgot I have to hit an extra button to go to YouTube. So we're at the point where it's already 3-0 Vegas. As I said, Cinderella not going to the dance because, as I said earlier, this is the series where Mitch Marner is beating the I'm not a playoff player allegations. Oh my god, I didn't realize how red I was at the Stampeders game. It was raining, but apparently I got more sun than I thought. It's just a base tan. That's what I'm going to tell myself. But it was the power play goal in the second by Mikael Granlund. Good rush on the power play. I hate the slingshot, but it works to perfection here. Gets slung back, and Granlund absolutely wires it from the circles past he who shall not be named, assist to Troy Terry and Leo Carlson. But it was Dorofeev who shuts the door in the third. He gets a pair. First, just a good play, good pressure by the Vegas Golden Knights. Pumping it past Dostal for the first one. And then Rasmus Andersson gets the primary assist on another one that just gets by Dostal. Vegas gets on it, and a weak angle shot from Dorofeev beats the Ducks goaltender. Hanifin and Anderson, the pair of former Flames, get the assist on the final goal. And of course, that's not the only story of this game. Of course, we would be amiss to not talk about the fact in the matter from this game, the fact that Vegas did not go to the press conferences, did not make their head coach John Tortorella available, and this has cost a $100,000 fine to Torts, who, hey, we know he's on a short-term deal. Does he even make $100,000 for his playoff run with the Knights? And then, of course, Vegas being fined a second-round pick, and of course, Vegas did appeal, but no, this fine has been determined to be still enforceable. And man, that's a tough look for Vegas, because it's a team that's kind of skirted the boundaries, made their own rules for so long that a lot of fans just thought, oh, this is how it's going to be. But hey, the fact that they've been punished for not going to the press was finally a sign of maybe what's to come for the Vegas franchise moving forward. But of course, that would leave us with only one series, and hey, it's going to be those days where we don't have hockey on every day coming back for a while. And it took us until the absolute rout by the Sabres in Montreal, and this had some of the Habs fans and Canadian hockey fans in general kind of in a bit of a tizzy. But it was 7 unanswered goals from the Sabres after the Habs took control early or through the first period. Of course, first goal of the game was by Rasmus Dahlin. Of course, one of the players that maybe the most maligned for this Sabre squad. You have to remember when that fan base was so sad that they had to select Rasmus Dahlin with that second overall pick. But he gets his third of the playoffs. This is to Marcus Samuelsson and Zach Benson. That one only 32 seconds in. But the Habs answer right back, as they have a few times in this series. Win the face-off from Jake Evans, and Arbor Xhekaj, the big, tall, stout defenseman, absolutely stepped into that snapshot. Goes over the shoulder of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Then it was Ivan Demidov's turn. Or was it? Was it UPL? I always forget what numbers their goaltenders wear. Yeah, it was UPL in this one. Or no, it was Lyon to start, and UPL took over after that, after the 3 straight goals. So it was Lyon, UPL number 1, Conrad. But then it was the power play marker, and it's Ivan Demidov, as I said, finally gets off the schneid in the previous game, scores here on the power play with a very similar play. And something I've been seeing for the whole playoffs, the Habs move the puck incredibly well on the power play, don't always get shots off of it. But Demidov with his second, Lane Hudson 11 assists, Cole Caulfield his 5th of the playoffs. Then it was a shorty for the Habs as Jake Evans breaks away after Mike Matheson wins the puck battle. And it's 2-on-1, and Jake Evans just with that power move to keep the puck, snaps it past Lyon, and that would be all she wrote for Lyon in this series. Went to UPL from that point on. Goaltending change obviously sparked the Sabres. So I'm not going to go through every goal here because there was a fair few of them. Zucker, Benson, Jack Quinn, Consta Helenius, Jack Quinn again, Tage Thompson, and Zach Metsa were your 7 in a row for the Sabres as they rout the Habs on the Centre Bell home ice. And I don't know, it was kind of the alarm bells going off for the Habs fans in this one because, you know, home ice advantage has always been such a big thing for the Habs. Of course, the Calgary Flames, the only team to defeat the Habs on home ice at the in Montreal to that point in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So Montreal, home base has always been a source of their power. But, of course, it wasn't then, and the Habs had to go on the road to complete the final game of the conference semifinals. And they, again, start off quickly. Phil Deneau, his first goal of the playoffs, assist to Caden Gooley and Alexandre Texier. Good work down below the goal line once again. Put it back out front. Bounces off Deneau and finds its way through Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And hey, ESPN, if I can say it, a boy who lives on the prairies, your broadcasters and desk can certainly learn how to say Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen before the next season. Or hey, just say UPL. Like, dude's got a nickname because his name's hard to pronounce for a reason. But then it was the power play going to work for the Habs. Zachary Bolduc, not one of the known stars, but has 3 goals in the playoffs. And of course, it's Suzuki and Hudson setting it up. Good work from Hudson along the blue line. Allowed to just walk it down. His shot bounces off a leg, and Suzuki puts it back out to Bolduc. A very similar goal that we've seen Demidov score twice in the playoffs. But the Sabres would not go quietly into the night. In the second period, it was Jordan Greenway with some good hard work down below the goal line. And eventually the puck gets back to the D-man, fired on. Malenstein and Samuelson, the assists on that one. It was just kind of a brawl in front of the net. And of course, Greenway steps in, or it was Marcus Samuelson who stepped in, deflects off Greenway in that mound of bodies in front of Jakob Dobesh. And then 6 minutes into the second period, it's once again how important face-offs are. Ryan McLeod wins the draw, gets it back to Owen Power, and Owen Power tips it over to Rasmus Dahlin, and he tucks it past Jakob Dobesh. Pressure from both sides would go all the way through regulation, but there's nothing quite like an overtime in Game 7. The Sabres, midway through, unable to hold the puck in the zone, gets turned over, and a nothing wrist shot gets by UPL, and it's the unlikeliest of heroes. But hey, he's done it 2 series in a row. It's Alex Newhook. Hey, Marty, you might need to share the Eliminator nickname as Alex Newhook advances the Canadien de Montreal to the next round of the playoffs in a series that was toe-to-toe. The Habs, in a game that only had 2 penalties. if you watch the rest of this series, it's been hard, it's been physical. There's been lots of special teams time in a game that only had 2 penalties called, 1 power play goal. The penalties, it's truly playoff hockey. The whistles were away, allowing us to get to the conference finals. Of course, in the East, that's going to be the Carolina Hurricanes, who have yet to drop a game, taking on the Canadiens du Montreal, having a 12-day break between games, a week and a half. Maybe they went down to Cancun, some of the players, go get that sun before they have to come back and take on the Canadiens. I don't think so. I would want to keep my team in town, even if I did have that long break. And then the Colorado Avalanche taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, that first game will be tonight with the Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Colorado Avalanche in Colorado. Colorado, of course, that President's Trophy winners, and it hasn't seemed to be much of a curse thus far. But Vegas is that always perpetually dangerous challenger. And hey, for the Avs, Cale Makar expected to be out for game 1. However, on the other side, Mark Stone is also, I believe it was still questionable to play in game 1. So both teams could be without stars, of course, Stone being the captain of the Vegas Golden Knights. And then it will turn over to the Eastern Conference. Of course, that game taking place on Thursday. At least I think it's taking place. Now, that one will be Saturday. Or am I looking at game 2? I was looking at game 2. Yes, it will be tomorrow. I was like, are they giving them an even bigger break? No, tomorrow will be Montreal versus Carolina. Carolina, of course, the host side there. Will it be this team that, as I said, has been a proverbial buzzsaw through the entire Eastern Conference? Or will it be the young, plucky upstart in the Montreal Canadiens, led by former Calgary Flame Martin St. Louis? Will they be the ones to find a hole in the armor of this squad? Of course, who will be the ones who continues on? Who will be the story? Will it be the continued story of Jakub Dobeš backstopping this Montreal squad? Will it be just the absolute unit that didn't make trades at the deadline in Carolina? Will it be the President's Trophy winning Colorado Avalanche, or will it be the much maligned, in the eyes of many fans, Vegas Golden Knights, who will continue on in this playoffs? Of course, I don't know. I'm personally hoping it will be a battle of Quebec and formerly Quebec. I'm hoping it will be the Canadiens du Montreal taking on the Colorado Avalanche. However, my brain is so fried by Calgary Flames fandom. I kind of want the Vegas Golden Knights to win the Stanley Cup, because then the Flames get an extra first-round draft pick in 2028. That's 2 years from now. But hey, that's a pretty good draft. That would be the, I think that's the Maddox Schultz draft. We'll have to see. But anyways, that is what we had to look forward in the NHL playoffs. Of course, I've also heard some rumblings of some other things going on in Vegas in regards to long-term injury results, and how they've been using that nefariously. But of course, that reporting is, I'm just hearing rumors and rumblings. Don't really want to say more than that. Say I don't have that officially at all. But I'm going to try something here, folks. I am going to go to a shorter be right back screen, only 3 minutes. Go grab a drink, get yourself prepared. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then I'm going to return talking a little bit about the Calgary Stampeders preseason, talk about all things minor Canadian sports when we return here on the Woodshed Sports Report. We are back. Oh, and I realized I had music going, but it wasn't actually playing for you guys out there in internet land. Hey, that's my fault. But just going to talk a little bit here about the CFL and the Canadian Premier League is that both of those seasons, well, the CPL season rolls on, and the CFL, hey, they just had their first string of preseason games. Of course, here in Calgary, that was the 20-15 win over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And of course, it wasn't even a full Rough Riders team that was brought to Calgary. Of course, lacking a lot of their first team players, um, as they didn't want to lead out a lot of their starters. Of course, it was the first action we've seen of Jack Cohen, who is really one of the players who a lot of people feel has the potential to potentially take those reins, as it is an aging CFL quarterback class. Guys like Zach Collaros, Trevor Harris, and Bo Levi Mitchell kind of entering the end of their contention windows or careers. So got to see a lot of the young man. And hey, he was pretty darn good in the half of action that he got. Of course, we saw a little bit of former Calgary Stampeders Tommy Seaton. And I can't remember, but Shager is their third string quarterbacks. It'll be interesting to see where this Calgary Stampeders roster goes. And hey, it was my first time seeing how the game would look, of course, with the beginnings of the 35-second clock and the couple of other alterations in the CFL rules. Of course, we talked about that in the first set of our episodes, but of course, I'll just give you the basis of what changes are happening this year. Because it is the gameplay tweaks that are coming in this year. Of course, the new rules around the Rouge, the 35-second play clock until the 3-minute warning, and of course, something we've never had to really worry about here in Calgary with McMahon Stadium and its vastness is having the benches on up at the sidelines. I don't think I don't get to watch a ton of the other preseason games thus far. But yeah, really interesting to start to see some of these things coming in with especially the changes to the Rouge. That's something I really wanted to see a little bit more in the game that went on this weekend. Of course, only saw a little bit of Vernon Adams in this game. But of course, didn't really expect to see him a lot. And of course, behind him, Love got a little bit of action for his start. And of course, we saw the Sibley siblings playing today. Of course, Matt Sibley, the receiver, and his sister is one of the Outriders, so it was kind of a fun story there. But yeah, for a game that didn't have a lot of scoring, of course, only 3 touchdowns scored, and a Calgary Stampeders roster that didn't feature Rene Paredes. It was an interesting time for these Calgary Stampeders. Obviously, you had McTamaney and Hodge, your 2 kickers. McTamaney being the international place kicker who was drafted in the internationals draft. And then Hodge, of course, a kicker and a punter and a Canadian. So you have to wonder if him having the ability to fill 2 positions in case of injury need, we'll see him head to the practice roster when the preseason wraps up. Of course, you saw a couple of cuts previous to the game even starting as rosters trimmed down early and often for these CFL teams as they continue to head towards the regular season. And of course, those took place back on the 13th. We didn't talk about them. The only one that I was really sad to see was Kalen St. Cyr. Incredible dude. I ran into him more than a few times. Of course, I live right near McMahon Stadium with a lot of the players, but I ran into Kalen at my Safeway a lot. Dude was always smiling. I really hope he manages to find a new home for the 2026 season. And of course, I talked about Shamar McBean. He was a 2026 draft selection by the Riders out of UBC. Really happy to see him. He had a couple of big catches. And of course, unfortunately, a couple drops to add on to that. And also, it was interesting to see some down the depth chart standouts, because listed as the third string running back, Lynch Adams really looked good. And of course, we saw a little bit of shuffling of the O-line, because there is a challenge at the left tackle between Demery and Buford. We'll have to see how that shakes out. And of course, you're going to want to see a little bit more from the Stamps defense this year. You had a fair amount of change in the defensive backfield and linebackers. You only saw the starting backers for a couple of series, and a little bit of ring rust, I'd have to say, for the Stampeders linebacking core. Because you could hear Dave Dickinson from our seats, which are 8 rows up at McMahon Stadium. He was reminding his linebackers, quarterbacks live today, fellas, quarterbacks live, as you did see the young Cone get up into the linebackers a few times, going for extra yards. So have to wonder how that linebacking core, which has seen a little bit of turnover, how that will evolve. Of course, Micah Tights, kind of the only Canadian. Think he likely has a job penciled in just for ratio purposes, especially based on the fact that there isn't a ton of depth Canadian-wise at the rush end positions, which is kind of where you've seen this evolution of the ratio, focusing on that as a position. Of course, only saw a single series from a lot of the Canadian receivers as well. Jalen Philpott got 2 series, I do believe, when he was out there with Vernon Adams Jr. But I would have to say Ludwig Choquette, the Canadian running back, just continues to improve. Saw him for a couple extra series as well. You have to think he'll cycle in a little bit more this year on some plays that are, or some formations that are more suited to his skill set. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Clark Barnes, didn't see much of him in as well, and Sibley slotted in as that third string wide receiver, which it is rare. Of course, Clark Barnes, kind of that exception to the rule. You don't see a lot of Canadians out of that wideout position. You generally see that taken by one of the imports in the CFL. You usually see Canadians at that slot back who have the experience with the waggle. So we'll have to see how that continues on, because I do think just doing a quick check here, when's the next roster deadline? Oh no, it is 75 until the final cuts due to make their final regular season rosters on May 30th. Of course, there is the Calgary Stampeders Fan Fest going on the Saturday. Of course, there's also the Okotoks Dogs Fan Fest taking place at the same time, as both those seasons started around the same time. So we'll have to see with this 75-man roster what the Stampeders will do. Will they make some cuts to some guys to give some guys some extra playing time with only their second preseason game taking place? Of course, that second regular season game is going to be up in Edmonton, but not at Commonwealth. Commonwealth, unfortunately, unavailable because, hey, there's a big Canadian soccer game going on right before the World Cup, which is what I'm going to talk about on Friday. And, of course, I'm going to have some hot takes about traffic downtown in Toronto and, of course, FIFA trying to change how things are going there. And then some of the things that have been forced to shut down in Vancouver that I have strong feelings about, because is there really the fiscal benefit to a lot of things in Vancouver? FIFA saying, no, we need that space, you got to shut down for 2 months. We'll talk about that on Friday. But of course, BC Lions going to be playing in the Okanagan at the Apple Bowl. 18,000 or around 14,000 temporary seats have been raised up in Okanagan. And then, of course, Toronto not being able to play at BC Place Stadium. Or not BC Place. BMO Stadium in Toronto. So it's kind of interesting how the CFL season is going to start. So, but yeah, interesting things from the Calgary Stampeders. I have to wonder, is Vernon Adams going to see the field even up in Edmonton? Because why would you start your starting quarterback in a game that's being played at a city-owned stadium that's going to have temporary bleachers all around it? But whatever, my friend Graham Mosman, the voice of the in-stadium, the PA announcer for the Edmonton Elks, really excited for that game. Apparently there's been some massive improvements made at Clark Park, so hopefully that is true. My last final thoughts on the CFL is that third spot is likely going to be an actual quarterback for the Calgary Stampeders this year. As I see we had Quincy Vaughn listed as a fullback now, the only fullback for the Calgary Stampeders this year. So I have to wonder if they've found the focus on him, moving him to that true tight end fullback, whatever you want to call it, for the CFL. In terms of the CPL, of course, we talked about the Canadian Championship, talked about the Save the Caps, but we're going to look ahead a little bit in this CPL with Cavalry FC, still on their undefeated season. They look to keep that going as they return this weekend, the first game in quite a while at Atco Field, and of course they're facing off against a familiar foe in Pacific FC. Cavalry currently sits second in the CPL. And of course, the only team ahead of them is their cross-country rivals, Forge FC. Forge FC with 5 wins and 1 draw. Of course, Cavalry with 4 wins and 2 draws. York United nipping at the heels, however, they've only played 5 matches and they're at 3-2 as well. Or rather, Inter Toronto FC. Still call them York United, York 9. Whatever you want to call them, when a league hasn't even seen its 10th anniversary and your team already is on rebrand number 3, maybe there's time to look at that. Of course, below them is Atletico Ottawa. They've played 6 matches, 2 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses. Super du Quebec have their pair of early season wins, but are currently on a 2-game losing streak. And then, of course, you have the HFX Wanderers, the new home of Marco Carducci, and they're learning the hard way that paying a goalkeeper as much as they did might not be the way to go. They're at a 1 win, 2 draw, 3 loss scenario, having a hard time putting the ball in the net at a -3 goal differential. Only below them is Vancouver FC, as they are 1-1 and 4. Of course, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw, 4 losses. And then at the bottom is the visitors for this upcoming match, Pacific FC, trying to find a way to score some goals because they are a -6 goal differential, as they only have 1 draw and 5 losses on the season. So, of course, a lot of people have this pendant as a victory for the Cavs. And hey, looking at the weather for Calgary, this might be the first game that Calgary is going to be played in Calgary with some, decent weather. Trying to find the 7-day forecast, because when we head on to Sunday, it is going to be a high of 19 in the afternoon for that match. It is going to be a little blustery, with a chance of rain. I think we had a little bit of a drizzle on us at the CFL game. Get out to Atco Field, find your way there, whether that's jumping on one of the buses at Elephant and Castle or the Ship and Anchor down on 17th, or whether that's finding your way down to Kildare's Alehouse and then taking the bus from Kildare's over to the match, or hey, parking's free with your purchase of a ticket. Head on down to Spruce Meadows, Atco Field, enjoy a wonderful game and a very successful Cavalry FC squad. But as I said, we are going to have a string of shorter breaks in today's show. When we return, it's going to be the What About Everything Else segment here for the Woodshed Sports Report. Of course, my name, Conrad Wood, your host. We'll be back after this 4-minute break. We are back on the Woodshed Sports Report. Of course, I'm your host, Conrad Wood. And apologies for the lower fi and lower tempo music that we've been using today. I was told the previous playlist that I was using was getting copyright flags on YouTube, so we had to change the provider that I'm using. But we are going to talk a little bit about the recent news that it has been rumored that Craig Conroy has said that outside of a few of elite or core assets, a lot of the Calgary Flames players will at least listen to trade offers on them. Of course, I think that is Dustin Wolf and Zane Parekh, who are kind of the two untouchables at this point for the Calgary Flames. It's really interesting because what are the true untouchables? Are any of the other players on this Calgary Flames roster who didn't have a productive year this last year, should they be untouchable, or should what they are this year be the basis of what the Calgary Flames are looking at getting out of them or in return? Of course, Zane Parekh, Dustin Wolf, and to a lesser extent Devin Cooley, likely untouchable. Because, hey, Devin Cooley was one of the best backups in the entire league last year, and hey, maybe you move on from Cooley if the offer is good enough. But the Calgary Flames are, with losing the draft lottery in the manner that they did, of course, you have to remember that the 6th overall was the second most likely scenario for the Calgary Flames. But if if other teams want to pillage the Calgary Flames and allow the Flames to be a worse team and allow some of the youth that is coming from, depending on who you listen to and how you value, is potentially the 5th or 6th best squad in terms of futures and prospects in the entire league, I think you have to start listening to some of those voices and at least take the calls. But I'm going to go through the Flames roster and look at what some of the potential asks could be from Craig Conroy. Because if you're truly saying we're going to listen to offers on everyone, that is going to be something the Flames are going to, us as Flames fans, are going to have to do for the next little while. Of course, I think there's one other untouchable, not due to the fact that he's young and valuable to the Calgary Flames, but the salary cap number and useless factor. And of course, I am talking about Jonathan Huberdeau. His estimated value or effective value is going to be negative for almost every single team in the NHL. I highly doubt that outside of a contract buyout, which, hey, the Flames could use to maintain and get to the salary cap floor and not have Jonathan Huberdeau, the player, on their roster. But, hey, if you're going to be bad for a couple of years, why don't you just keep him and then buy him out when you're turning that corner? But I regress. It either is going to be a massive retention, which we know Murray Edwards is very much not a fan of, or you're going to be throwing in sweeteners to the deal, and I don't think the Calgary Flames are at the point where they need or should do that. Unless you're taking on other massively bad contracts that you realize, hey, maybe this is a shorter term really bad contract and someone thinks they can rebuild Jonathan Huberdeau. Maybe it's Pittsburgh and they reunite him with Anthony Mantha. I think that's kind of the only other boulder that the Calgary Flames have for this season. But outside of that, let's talk about some other players. Let's start with the player that I view as having a very off year, but having some elite caliber skills. And I'll start this list with Matt Coronato. If you are a team that thinks that this year was an abomination, and hey, maybe it's just Matt Coronato playing on a team that doesn't have a lot of skill in terms of setup men or really anyone in general, maybe this is a player that some other team finds some value in. So I think if you're looking at Matt Coronado, you're looking at him as a part of a package to bring in a star, or if someone else is just sit, or you're using him in a package to get into that top two, whether you're trading with Chicago or San Jose. I really think he would be a player that San Jose looks at because he is an elite shot. He has, in my estimations, one of the best wrist shots in the league. And depending on who you ask, based on his development, he'd either be a roster player plus a early round pick. Especially because he's a young, cost controlled goal scorer. And that is a very, very difficult thing to acquire in the NHL. So that will elevate his price tag, even if you disagree with me on the fact that he is an elite goal scorer. I think it really is a high cost situation for the team looking to acquire someone like him. Then we'll take a jump down to Connor Zary. Of course, he's kind of rebounding from his knee injury still in my mind. Hopefully next year he'll be back to full strength on that leg. But again, he's another guy that is you're gonna have to do one of those change of scenery swaps, where it is a younger player coming back in the other direction, or a premium prospect, or hey, that first round pick. And if the Flames are in the business of let's just collect as many lottery balls as we can to bounce around over the next few years, I think that Connor Zary is one of those guys because, hey, again, team controlled, young, has that offensive upside. If you're a team that feels that he is a center, he can play that role in probably that third line center area. But those are kind of two young blue chips that if Craig Conroy is fielding calls on everybody, I think those are your top cost options. But then, of course, there is the high value veterans that are on this team. A lot of people have said, oh, are you going to trade Michael Backlund? I don't think so. I think you allow Backlund to remain a Flame as long as he wants to. If he is somebody saying, though, that I want to move on to have a chance at Lord Stanley's chalice, you have to let that be a consideration. Of course, Michael Backlund, one of the steadiest centers, especially defensively, that you can get. Of course, does have that 2-year contract extension kinking in this season. So you'd be getting the year plus rental if he's traded in season and 2 years of Michael Backlund. If you trade for him right now, he is a great leader. He has high playoff IQ. What will you get for him, considering the age of this player? Probably not a ton. And again, this is Michael Backlund has to want that. I don't think you can trade off a guy that has been with the Flames as long as he has without him asking him. So he's one of those guys that has been on some boards, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I think for the fan base, that veteran leadership, I don't know if my friend Sean is up on the Twitch stream right now, but I think he'd agree with me that veteran leadership is something that this team needs to retain and potentially add in the offseason. Then, of course, that brings us to the guy who I said needed to be out of town. At this trade deadline, he has a single season left on his current contract. Of course, I am talking about Blake Coleman. And depending on if the Calgary Flames want to retain, of course, they get a couple of retention spots back this season with the Rasmus Anderson retention, as well as the Jacob Markstrom retention falling off this offseason. If the Flames are willing to retain for this 1 year, the price for him just goes up exponentially. It could bring you as high as a mid first round pick if the right bidder comes wanting him at the draft. As he is an incredible penalty killer. He is a high work rate forechecker. He has a Stanley Cup ring. He brings in that culture that everyone's leaning into. And hey, he's somebody who can play up and down your lineup. Like, if you get teams, I would love to see him take over that Tyler Toffoli role in San Jose. I'd love to see him as part of the deal that potentially raises the Flames up into that earlier first round consideration. Like, I would love if it was a Blake Coleman, the Calgary Flames 6th overall. If that's the deal that can get you up into that Chicago or San Jose spot, and maybe you have to throw in another second round pick as the sweetener. I would love to see something like that be the reality for these Calgary Flames. And of course, the other real asset that the Calgary Flames have is the guy they acquired in that trade with Vegas. Of course, I'm talking about Zach Whitecloud. Whitecloud has been great in the community, which is one of the reasons I could see the Calgary Flames actually talking more extension with him than trade. But a right shot playoff defenseman, guy that has a ring, again, is always valuable league wide. Always someone will be knocking on the door about hit. You have to think will be knocking on that door come trade deadline. So that's your kind of next level if you're looking at it from the Calgary Flames. Then you go into guys like Igor Sharangovich, who had an abysmal year. I would love to see him find a new home. Morgan Frost, again, he's a center, still young, and somebody could say, hey, he's our answer for the playoffs. Joel Farabee as well, somebody that played well on a struggling Flames team last year. People will see him as having more upside than he's had after he was acquired in that Philadelphia trade. Kevin Ball, big right-hand shot, big and mobile. If he continues to develop defensively this year, he's somebody that I have to think the Flames could move on from. Martin Pospisil, Marty Party. Like, teams love the guys that play that agitator role. Of course, there's always the question of what happens if there's another concussion. Teams love that Martin Pospisil. I think they'll overlook all the red flags. And he would be a fan favorite on someone like the Avalanche or Utah if they continue to bump forward. Like, he is a guy I could see in a lot of markets having a lot of upside. Sam Honzek, hey, he's just had the worst injury luck. Does someone take a long shot on him? If the Flames decide to go with a defenseman at the draft, does that mean Hunter Brustevich suddenly becomes available for the right package? Right shot offensive defensemen have truly become one of the most valuable picks. Does a team take the magic beans that is Adam Klapka and say, we know what he is X and he's going to fit perfectly onto our roster in this role? I think you have to listen to answers on that, despite the fact that I have his Southeast Asian history or heritage jersey behind me. Like, I seem to only get guys that leave. Like, my Flames Pride jersey is Dan Vladar. Who knows? Maybe he'll get moved at the draft and I'll just have more former Flames on my wall. Does a team want that veteran leadership of Joel Hanley that always needed 7th defenseman? Same with Braden Pahal. Like, right shot depth is always of a value to any team. But, like, in terms of value, it goes that Coronado, Zari, Coleman, Whitecloud, then probably Backlund, Marty Party, Sam Honzek, Ball, that group behind him. I have to think Blake Coleman, if Craig Conroy has learned nothing from the Rasmus Anderson scenario, I think Blake Coleman needs to be moved at the draft, if not sooner. I think Igor Sharangovich needs to be the other name that's not on this roster moving forward. Just a guy that could not produce reliably this year and has a big contract. That's another guy that you might have to wait to the trade deadline and retain on, however. But yeah, it's going to be a year of pivots for the Calgary Flames. Does this necessarily mean that there is going to be a buyer for whatever the Flames are selling? You can never tell that, especially this far away from the season. But, you know, that is what this Flames organization is going to have to ask themselves. Where do we see this team going? Do we need to realize that we built too good of a team for last year to truly have the wheels fall off and have a shot at some of the top guys in this draft. And as well, Caleb Malhotra playing his way out of this scenario. But I think that's all I have to say on this episode of the Woodshed Sports Report. I think we hit everything we wanted to. Of course, usually this would be Wild Card Wednesday where I would talk about something not sports related. But, you know, I think I kind of did a weekend missing recap today. We will come back with Fired Up Friday on Friday. Probably talk a little bit more Flames. Talk about probably the Memorial Cup as that is coming up as well. I can't remember even where the Mem Cup is this year. Oh, it's off in Kelowna. So the Rockets will be the host. Okay, day one is coming up on Friday. So we'll talk Memorial Cup. We'll talk about the 4 winners of the regional leagues. And of course, the home Kelowna Rockets. We'll discuss them as well. But hey, it's going to be interesting, of course. 50 years of the Canadian Hockey League. The Memorial Cup sponsored by Kubota. You can watch live on TSN RDS in Canada and in the States. Victory Plus and the NHL Network going to be the where you can watch it, because it is Chicoutimi Seguin, the Kitchener Rangers, the Everett Silvertips. Boy howdy, they're a wagon. I watched a little bit of the WHL championships there. Reed Nickel, of course, the likely one of those guys in that top tier. Of course, he's a 2010 birthday. The rookie out there. A lot of these. Reese Jameson, the former Calgary Canuck, at one point. Luke Vluswick, another Calgary native, the Philadelphia draft pick. Really love Luke. He's a great family. Of course, Landon DuPont, if you want to watch a guy the Calgary Flames will be watching for a long time. Jackson Pisani, son of Fernando Pisani. Like, this will be a really interesting squad to watch going forward. And I do believe the Rockets may be playing a 16-year-old as part of their roster. Just made that call up the other week, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the next few. Yeah, I think it was Harrison Baudiger who they just called up from the CSSHL. So we'll have to see what Kelowna does. And speaking of names that Flames fans will remember, Nate Corbet, the son of Rene Corbet, one of the defensemen off on that Kelowna Rockets team, and Tija Ginla. Maybe the Flames try and get him this offseason. Maybe we'll talk about that on Friday. But we will talk more about that as we come back on Fired Up Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Woodshed Sports Report. Once again, my name, Conrad Wood. We'll see you on Friday.